For this episode of Coffee with Closers, I'm sitting down with Max Rudman, who is the founder and CEO of Prodly. Prior to Prodly, he founded SteelBrick, which was acquired by Salesforce for $360 million. Stay tuned for my conversation with Max, where he shares some practical advice for entrepreneurs on how to build and successfully exit a company.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Hey Max, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Hey Samuel, good to be here.
Most certainly. Well, we've been planning this for quite some time. I think the pandemic has kind of kept us apart for a little while. So I'm glad we're finally doing this. And I think Godard Abel from G2 recommended that I should definitely have you on the show. So obviously, every entrepreneur that I've ever talked to, they all have an interesting story of overcoming obstacles to become an entrepreneur. So I'm pretty sure you have some interesting and similar story to share. Can you share with our audience a little bit about who you are and your journey of becoming an entrepreneur?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Max Rudman. I am currently building my second company called Prodly. And probably my biggest claim to fame in this world so far anyway, I'm hoping to change that with Prodly, is I was the founder of a company called SteelBrick that built a native CPQ configure price quote solution on Salesforce platform and was ultimately acquired by Salesforce in 2016. I don't know if I have a story of overcoming obstacles, but it has been sort of a long and windy road for me on the road to into entrepreneurship. I really had one real job in my life. I got hired, right out of college. I kind of got this gig at an ad agency, and I quickly got poached by this guy who started a .com back in, it was 1999. And so that's where I really caught, entrepreneurship bug, I think. It was really just exciting to be part of building, a solution from the ground up, building a company from the ground up. So when I left it in 2002, I started SteelBrick. And so I have this nice little story around why it's called SteelBrick. I'm sort of engineer by training, so I took a very logical approach to naming a company. I built a spreadsheet where I had a bunch of adjectives in one column and a bunch of nouns in another, and I wrote a macro that went through and put together a possible combination of the names. And I pasted it in that Mass domain name checker to make sure it was available, right? Because the domain name had to be available, right? So I think it was Yellow Brick that came out of that, but I had some buddies who were running an ad agency, so kind of helped me with early identity. So they came up with SteelBrick. We had this big flaming 3D logo. It was impossible to get rendered or sent to anyone. It was like a massive file that didn't really look that great on the website. But anyway, so I honestly started SteelBrick with really I knew I wanted to start my own company and have a go at it. I had a couple of ideas. And both of them actually turned out to be pretty good categories in the end, right? One of them was a survey tool. So obviously, survey is turned out to be a pretty good category of SaaS. SurveyMonkey is a big company, and the other was sort of a lead management and scoring system, which of course we now know as marketing automation, right? And so again, pretty good category with lots of big SaaS winners. But I was young and green, and I really I knew how to build code products, but I didn't know anything about selling them or marketing them. So, and it didn't really go anywhere. So I kind of, ended up doing a bunch of gigs in between. One of them was working for this mobile app company. And then in 2006, I sort of accidentally fell into the Salesforce ecosystem. I got hired by this guy who was running a consulting company to develop a quoting app for his client. And I did that, and it was if these guys need that, then probably all the other Salesforce customers need it. And so I was always looking for a product to build. I wasn't really interested in services. So that felt like a good opportunity. And at the end of the day, it was, it grew into what was known as SteelBrick CPQ, and which obviously is now called Revenue Cloud at Salesforce. It's a pretty big business.
Yeah, I think that was an amazing exit. I think the amount wasn't publicized, but I know it's in the couple of $100 million, right, in stocks and shares and options. And
Yeah, it was an all-stock deal. It was actually 360 million. I think that I'm not sharing anything confidential. That figure is public. It was a good exit for us, good outcome for us, for our investors. But frankly, it was the best outcome for Salesforce. We came in with, I want to say, 15 million in AR and 400 customers. It is now, I want to say, north of 400 million and probably 4,000 customers.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy that the Salesforce price, how much they pay for companies have just gone from the millions to the hundreds of millions to now the billion, right? I think the most recent was it $4.5 billion or something that they paid for the messaging app?
Yeah, Slack was actually
Slack.
Slack. Yeah, that was, I think, 19 or 29 billion.
Was
So that
it? Oh man,
was,
I'm way off. Yeah, that's just
we'll
crazy to
see.
me.
We'll see if that pays off. I think they had a few flame outs, like Buddy Media comes to mind, but by and large, I think they've done really well. I mean, Mark Benioff acquired well. And it was actually interesting. We had our SKO, mid-year SKO in Chicago last week, and our sales leader sort of quizzed us on statistics around what's the biggest product at Salesforce, and like I sort of readily fired off Sales Cloud, but it turns out it's Service Cloud now, which of course started as an acquisition of Instranet back in, I don't know when he acquired that, and of course Alex Dayon, who was the CEO, became the product leader for a long time, and so I think he's done a really good job of seeing what the next turn is, and also acquiring great people in the process, the executives leadership that carry the company to the next milestone.
Indirectly, Salesforce was one of our clients a long time back. So back in 2012, Salesforce acquired ExactTarget, but right before that acquisition, ExactTarget acquired iGo Digital, which was an Indiana-based tech company that was actually a product recommendation engine. So they were kind of folding that product into to ExactTarget, and that was about the same time Salesforce made the acquisition. So indirectly, we were actually a Salesforce a Salesforce vendor, and we're able to get checks from Salesforce. So I can say I've worked with Salesforce at some point. Interesting story there. But obviously, you've learned a lot in the process of building a SaaS company. You exited, then you went on to work as a VP at Salesforce, and now you're at this company. So how has your approach on building SaaS companies evolved over these years? I mean, you've been at this for quite some time now.
Yeah, I think probably my biggest lesson, and thanks to Goddard and his team, who I partner with at SteelBrick, is I'm a product guy, right? I'm an engineer by training, so and obviously I think product is very important, and I am sort of a product-oriented founder, but realizing just how important marketing is, how important figuring out how to position things, how to market them, how to talk about your product, how to sell it, right? It's just as important, if not more important, right? And so I think that was, like, as an engineer, as a product person, you kind of tend to intuitively maybe dismiss that, and then you see this all the time, right? With product founders, right? They think, like, if I only build a great product, it will sell itself, and people will come and find me. And maybe it's true with consumer companies, where it's kind of very high viral, coefficient, but certainly not true with enterprise companies, right? The product does not sell itself, no matter how good it is. You have to sell it, you have to market it. And so realizing that is probably the biggest lesson I've learned so far.
Yeah, and I think that is a big lesson, because I think what you said, because a lot of these misconceptions that we have, like, if that awareness, like lack of awareness, is usually the biggest obstacle for businesses to really reach that critical growth stage, and marketing really plays a big part in it. Whoever can spend the most in acquiring a customer is always going to win, right? Even if the product isn't superior, but if they're doing a better job of marketing it, they are going to win at the end of the day, and because we do know that.
I agree. And, it's not just kind of driving awareness, right? It's also like, how do you do that, right? And it's not just about spending and advertising, right? It's also figuring out how to talk about the product, right? You can take exact same product, the exact same ad spend, and have vastly different outcomes, because, if you can hit the nerve with a prospect and talk about your product in a way that resonates with them, more, that's obviously going to be much more effective in customer acquisition. We're going through this very same thing at Prodly right now, right? Like, how do we talk about our vision, our product, in a way that resonates with customers and really makes them come to us.
So obviously, you said you are an engineer by trade, and you've actually, built a product, and you're focused on building an amazing product, right? But then just by being the territory of a founder and a CEO, there's a lot of other responsibility of a leader, a visionary, a fundraiser, all these different functions that you have to fill into. How did you, prepare yourself and train yourself to actually fill in those functions? And what advice do you have for other entrepreneurs who are either starting a company or running a company to kind of expand beyond their core competencies to do some of those things?
Right. I think there's two parts to it. One is, I think it's important to, and I'll just sort of apply this generally, it's important to know your strengths and weaknesses, right? And sort of recognize your strengths and weaknesses and embrace them, right? Like, I would never say that I'm, a great marketeer, right? And even if I do, I'm not, right? So I know where my strength is, and I optimize for that. And so how do you fill the gaps in your weaknesses? Well, you hire, right? And I think at this point, I'm sort of smart enough. I've been around the block. I kind of know what it looks like, right? And that was probably the biggest thing I was missing before, right? As an engineer, I knew what building a product involves. I knew what coding involves. I know what good code looks like and what bad code looks like. I know what a good architecture, elegant architecture looks like, what a bad one looks like. I had no idea what high-performing sales team looks like and what a not high-performing sales team looks like, right? I didn't know what good marketing looked like, And so I think just learning what that is step one. And then, recognizing that you can't do it, because that's not your strength. So you go look for people who will do that for you. And I've been fortunate enough to have that at Prodly. Certainly with Haley runs our marketing and the sales leadership that we have. So, it's an ongoing process, but, I think the key is to sort of recognize where you need help and where you don't. And by contrast, I still don't have, a VP of product, right? And we will at some point, but that's the least of my problems, as I like to say. So I'm going to, focus my energy and my capital and on hiring people in the roles that, are not my strength.
Mm-hmm. And obviously you've done this a couple of times, right? You talked about SteelBrick, and now you're building this new company. So what's the why? What's the motivation? Obviously you've had a really successful exit. What's the drive behind wanting to keep doing it over and over again?
I get asked this question a lot. I think for me, like, I'm enterprise software all day, every day. And I think just sort of as a core motivator, why I started SteelBrick and why I went into the space, I can remember even from the early days when I got exposed to computers, right? Some kids would be playing video games, right? For me, it was like I could never fathom playing a video game on the computer, because I'm like, there's this amazing productivity tool, right? That can make you, like, they can calculate things for you, and they can take, work off your plate. They can, speed up your day. Like, why would you want to waste it on a video game? So for me, it was always about kind of leveraging computers and computing power, to drive efficiencies, So maybe I'm just lazy at the core, maybe that's what it is. And, so that always excited me. So that was probably sort of the core motivator. And now, could I have retired? Probably, but, or could I have stayed at Salesforce and, had a very, low stress, very lovely life? Sure. But I think I enjoy building companies. I enjoy building products. It's my life now is certainly a lot more stressful than it used to be when I was at Salesforce, but it's more enjoyable, in the end. It's more meaningful, I think. And so I want to do it again.
Yeah, most certainly. And I think, like you said, if you're an entrepreneur, you kind of have that builder mentality, right? So you always want to be creating something new as opposed to kind of coasting. And yeah. I can relate to you in terms of like that gaming side of it. I guess I kind of lived in an era where game wasn't that popular and didn't have a lot of, luxury to just sit there and play, and some of us had to actually go work. So put us into an entrepreneurial mode, go create something, as opposed to sit there in the mother's basement and playing video games.
Yeah, and nothing against gamers or anything. So
now people make a living.
Draw a lot of ire, but yeah, it's not that. But just for me, like that was not the exciting part about computers, right? It was building business software basically, and yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think like you said, I mean, people are making a living now playing video games. That's a completely different world. So obviously you've had the opportunity to work with, obviously at Salesforce, and you worked with at SteelBrick, a lot of leaders. You worked with a lot of leaders. What kind of leadership style do you describe that you have?
I mean, I think I would say I learned a lot from Godard. He's a mentor of mine, and so we talk regularly. So I think a lot of kind of what I learned about what a high performing company is, I've learned from him. So, I think I kind of, and this is the part I sort of always kind of struggle with a little bit, is I think delegating, especially for like founders and people who are the builders, it's sometimes difficult. So it's still a struggle for me at times. But, what I found is the key is really hiring great people, right? That you trust. And if you do trust them, then like delegation is easy. I can never sort of do it halfway, right? Like either I fully trust you and I'm going to fully delegate, or I don't, in which case I'm going to be kind of micromanaging you, right? So you don't want the latter, you want the former, obviously. And so I think, like, to me, the job of a leader is to outline the vision, get alignment, and just keep everybody marching in the same direction, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, it all kind of points back to the right type of team members in your organization. So it does make it easy, right? Like you said, know your core strengths. If you're not in sales and marketing pro, then find the people that actually are good at it. So now you trust them enough to hand over that key and say, hey, go run that, acquisition channel, or go run that marketing channel, right? So then you can 100% delegate it and then just keep them responsible for some sort of a metric that they're going to report back to you, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong, by the way, in case I didn't make it clear, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with being more product focused or being more sales and marketing focused. Right? It's my point is, whichever one you are, embrace that part and compensate in the parts where you're weak with great hires.
And obviously you've learned a lot, and everybody make mistakes. But are there any big learning lessons you've learned from having built SteelBricks and exited? Are there anything that you were like, oh man, when I do it again, I won't make that mistake again? Is there any life lessons from having built SteelBricks that actually helped you do Prodly a lot better?
Yeah, I think the biggest one was probably not thinking big enough. Right when I went into, I was going to say when I started SteelBrick, but as I explained, I kind of started it, way before I got into Salesforce and sort of what became SteelBrick. But when I got into Salesforce and the CPQ, at first it was like I was building a lifestyle business. I'm like, wow, we charged, I think, like $29 a user or something, at the beginning. Maybe it was 19 even. I'm like, oh, great. If I get like, 1,000 users, well, that's like, $30,000, right, a month. Like that's, 360 a year. That's awesome, And I didn't really think hard enough about, what it could be. And it's like describe the difference as I was building a quoting app, right, versus a CPQ solution. So kind of a very tactical versus a very strategic category that emerged. And so if I had, I think, thought about that more strategically, thought bigger, maybe I would have, raised money faster, maybe we would have gone faster and earlier. So I think that's probably my biggest lesson is, think big, and obviously not everything is big, and so there's nothing wrong with building a lifestyle business either, right? But you got to know which one it is, and if there is an opportunity to build something bigger, go for it. If you have if you have desire to do it and raise capital and figure out how to go faster.
Yeah, I kind of like that Think and Grow Rich from the Napoleon Hill book, because I think a lot of times having that vision will help you get clarity, and then you can organize the team, you can organize the structure of the organization and the product, whatever, right? The product roadmap, anything and everything to really get to that vision. So if you don't really see it as big as it can get, then obviously it's not going to get there. And like you said, after Salesforce acquired it, it became a big revenue driver. You said now it's 4,000 clients or something that Salesforce have on the platform?
Yeah, I think I don't know the exact numbers anymore, obviously, but yeah, it's somewhere in that neighborhood and probably coming up on $500 million in AR. So it's big. It's a big business. And honestly, like, they're just scratching the surface, right? When you think about how many customers Salesforce has, right? It's 200,000 or whatever it is. Not every one of them is going to need it, but 4,000 is,
it's still a small percentage of their current total business. Yeah, that is crazy. So you touched on, and you touched on the whole concept of raising capital, which I often talk to a lot of founders, and some are totally opposed to the whole concept. They're all about grinding it and basically building it from self-funding the whole corporation, right? The whole organization. Whereas the other side is like, hey, we got to be the first mover advantage. We got to get to the market really fast and make a splash and capture as much as the market share, or like you said, creating a category. So what's your perspective on it? Obviously, having it done before and now you're redoing it again. Are you taking any capital from outside, or you're just self-funding it? What's your advice for someone who's actually starting out in this journey?
Yeah. So I've done it both ways. And so at SteelBrick, I bootstrapped until, Gutter and team came in, and that's when we really poured fuel on the fire and raised a ton of, I think, selling $70 million altogether in capital before Salesforce acquisition. And it probably, we've also raised outside capital. So I am actually a fan of a hybrid approach. I think bootstrapping makes sense early on, and especially if you're in the SaaS business. And this is where I think which business you're building, not even what category, but what type of business you're building really probably makes a difference, right? If you're in a really capital intensive business, hardware or, biotechnology or clean energy, I don't know, whatever, it's probably harder to do. But certainly in SaaS and enterprise SaaS, the landscape is such, right? Especially if you're a technical founder, right? When you look at all the different frameworks and the open source and the infrastructure as a service, right? All the web services, Amazon, Google, right? All the infrastructure that's available to you, right? It doesn't really take a ton of money. There's no reason why you should have to go to the outside investor, to outside capital to build your product, right? And sort of prove that initial product market fit. When you want to raise money is when you need to go and invest in sales and marketing, right? And really put the pedal to the metal.
Yeah, and I think it really, like, the key ingredient here is the founder is, if they're a technical founder, they're very tech savvy and they're a coder, then that is a lot easier to do. But if you need to go find a co-founder who's a programmer, then both of them working together to build that product. But I think that is probably the biggest check, I suppose. Having somebody who could be either a co-founder or you yourself is able to do the programming to a certain extent.
Right, but even if you need to go higher, you got Odesks and like all these some freelancers. You can get somebody pretty cheap, right, to just go build that prototype. And I think I've seen this at SteelBrick, like part of the reason that we're so successful is that the product, because I bootstrapped it and really built it sort of one customer at a time, and I didn't have resources. I didn't have money to throw at the problem. So instead of kind of customizing with professional services, we would really build every feature, every request, every requirement in the product. It really had time to gestate, away from the pressures of investors and delivering returns. And it's important for a product, right? It takes time for it to sort of gel and for you to kind of gain the critical mass of functionality, work out all the bugs, and have a really robust product. And so when you do that, that's the right time to really start investing and go to market, and that's where you need capital, obviously. And so I kind of did the same thing at Prodly too, actually. And I think that's why I call it sort of the hybrid approach, right? You bootstrap in the beginning, build the product, or at least the MVP of it, or some V1, call it, get customers, prove out the market fit, and then you go raise capital to really scale it.
Yeah, that's where the growth really is, and that's if you really are trying to acquire a customer at scale, that's when you need to have the team and the marketing spend. And I mean, I remember
need reps, right? You need reps. You need advertising, right? Google isn't going to take your stock. I mean, it wants cash, right? So same with the salespeople, right? They want money, and so that's what I'm saying is you obviously need capital, you need cash to really go fast. And if you don't want to do that, that's also fine, right? But I think, there's some pros and cons to just continuing to grow organically, but that's basically a lifestyle business. And, again, nothing wrong with that, I suppose, but you need to decide. I think the important thing is to decide which one you want, and also then align your investment strategy to that, right? You can't go raise outside capital or get VC money if you're going to run a lifestyle business, right? You just don't do that, because investors want returns and they want growth. So if you're not able or willing to go after growth, then you shouldn't raise capital.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I think it really comes down to that, the original concept of like, hey, am I in the lifestyle business, or am I actually going to build a business that's scalable with a big dream? And then if so, then what do I need, right? The team that I need and the resources that's going to be required to grow that. So I know earlier in the segment, you talked a little bit about productivity, and I often ask this to all our founders and business leaders, because I think the biggest weakness we all have is we just don't have enough time in the day to get anything and everything we need to get done. So are there any productivity hacks that you have that you might give us a recommendation for others to kind of follow or adapt?
Is productivity hacks?
Yes.
Yeah, so I got one for sure. I use this email client called Superhuman. I don't know if you've heard about it, and it's really amazing. I highly recommend it. And I think it's probably not. I don't know if it's for everyone. Probably for like sales professionals, I can see how it wouldn't be that great. But for at least for anyone in a role like mine, where it's a lot of emails coming in, you got to triage it and sort of process them, and some turn into tasks, some turn into forwards, right? You got to disposition them in some way quickly. I found it super helpful, and I really like the company. I like the founder a lot. Vishal, I think is his name, and so not only has he made great software, but he also sends these like monthly newsletters with actually a lot of interesting tips. Like, it's nothing to do with the product. It's just, and he actually talks a lot about productivity and cites like psychology research that talks about how your brain works, and talks about, how to kind of covering sort of a range of topics that I've really found fascinating and really useful and helpful to me. So I highly recommend that.
Yeah. So it's got Superhuman is the technology, the tool?
Superhuman. It's called Superhuman is the app name. It's an email client, basically. It connects to your Gmail, so it doesn't replace Gmail. It still uses Gmail or whatever. I don't know what we use Gmail, so I know it supports that. I'm not sure what other email services it supports, but it's an email client, so it kind of replaces Apple Mail or Outlook client if you're a PC user, with just a much more streamlined email experience.
So you can create rules, and it would automatically, based on rules, do certain things.
You can do rules, but really, the thrust of their product is just speed of processing emails, right? Like, everything is a keyboard accessible, so you don't really have to use your mouse at all. Like, everything is like shortcuts, and and really, really fast.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, I always tell people, like, somebody else's email is their to-do list for you. So anything to avoid that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
One last question that I have is, obviously, knowing what you know today, what advice would you give your younger self?
I wish I kind of took the plunge in entrepreneurship sooner. Although, in some ways, I sort of did this, not much longer than graduating college. And actually, in college, I also had a little side business building websites. But maybe it's thinking bigger. Maybe that's the advice, right? And just being more aggressive and seeking out information and learning more about the non-technical, not product aspects of building a company, or maybe getting a mentor sooner. Maybe that's what it is. But working with Godard and his team, I learned a lot, and that sort of inspired me to, I think, keep honing my craft and learning more about things that I, like I said, naturally wasn't exposed to or didn't really have, I think, kind of natural disposition towards, right? So,
yeah, I think that's a common theme I've heard from a lot of entrepreneurs. I think take the jump, leap of faith. Don't wait too long, because I think you can overcalculate and overplan, but you don't know what you're going to find out until you actually start and do something. So it's definitely, and also just the mentorship is super important, because I think, I don't know what the exact phrase is, but you're the average of whoever you hang out with, right? So you hang out with people who are smarter than you, who are more successful than you. Some of that skills and knowledge and experience is going to rub off on you, and you're going to learn from them, and you avoid the mistakes they've made in the past.
Totally. But I think it's also, I think you're right. It's both, right? Picking up the experience and knowledge share, but it's also the motivating factor, right? You see, I see Godard now, he's on his third company, right? G2 now just raised the Series D, achieved unicorn status, right? So, that motivates you to succeed as well,
Most certainly. Well, Max, I certainly appreciate you sharing this afternoon with me and sharing some of your life experience. And thank you for your humility and willing to spare the time even after, build a company and have a lot other stuff to be responsible and accountable for. So
I appreciate the opportunity, Samuel. Really good to talk to you, and thanks for the time.
Most certainly.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.